By the time Rumi reached his late 30s, he was a man at the very center of his world. In the city of Konya, in what is now Turkey, he was a respected teacher of religious law, a preacher whose words filled the mosque, the head of a busy school with hundreds of students. He had inherited the position of his father, a renowned scholar, and he had deepened it through years of study. People came to him for rulings and for guidance. He wore the robes of a master. His days were ordered, dignified, and full. By every measure his own age understood, he had arrived. And then, in the autumn of the year 1244, a stranger walked into his life and turned it inside out. His name was Shams of Tabriz. He was a wandering dervish, older than Rumi, with no school, no following, and no patience for the comfortable religion of the learned. People called him Shamsi Perinda, Shams the bird, because he never stayed anywhere long. He had spent his years on the roads of the Muslim world, searching by his own account for a single companion who could bear the full weight of what he carried inside. He was fierce, unpredictable, and utterly free. To most people, he seemed like a beggar. To Rumi, he would become the face of the divine itself. The stories of their first encounter differ, as the best stories often do, but they agree on the shock of it. In one telling, Rumi was riding through the marketplace, surrounded by students, when Shams seized the reins of his mule and asked him a blunt, almost insolent question about the difference between two great figures of the spiritual past. The question struck so deep that, in some versions, Rumi fainted. In another telling, Shams found Rumi sitting beside a fountain with his books piled around him and asked what they were. When Rumi answered that they were knowledge Shams could not understand, the dervish threw the books into the water. Rumi cried out, and Shams pulled them back, dry, untouched. Now it was Rumi who could not understand. Shams smiled and said that this was something the scholar's learning could not reach. Whatever the exact words, the meaning was the same. Here was a man who could not be impressed by Rumi's titles, who did not want his approval, who saw straight past the robes and the reputation to the living soul beneath. And that soul, for all its learning, was thirsty. Rumi had read about the love of God in 1,000 pages. In Shams, he met someone who seemed to be on fire with it. The two men withdrew together, and for many months they were almost inseparable. They would shut themselves away for days, lost in conversation so intense that no one else was allowed near. What passed between them, no one fully knows. Rumi later said only that he had gone looking for a teacher and found a friend, that the scholar had become a lover, that the mature and careful master had been reborn as a child of longing. The man who had built his life on books now wrote that love had burned his library to the ground. This transformation had a cost. Rumi's students grew jealous and bewildered. Their dignified teacher had abandoned his lessons and his sermons to spend his hours with a ragged unknown. They had lost their master to a man they could not respect, and resentment thickened into hatred. Twice Shams left Konya, fleeing the hostility. The second time, in the year 1248, he vanished entirely and was never seen again. Many believe he was murdered, perhaps with the knowledge of one of Rumi's own sons. Rumi searched for him in grief, even traveling to Damascus to look. He never found him in the flesh, but in his absence, something extraordinary happened. Rumi began to realize that the Shams he was seeking was no longer outside him. The beloved had become part of his own being. The fire had been passed from one heart into another. It was out of this loss that the poetry was born. A man who had never been a poet now began to speak in verse, almost helplessly, words pouring out of him as he turned and turned in circles of grief and ecstasy. His great collection of lyric poems he did not even sign with his own name. He signed it with the name of Shams. The friend had become the voice through which Rumi sang. This is the secret at the heart of Rumi's path, and it is worth holding quietly for a moment. He did not find God by climbing higher into knowledge. He found God by being broken open through love for another human being, until the wall between self and other, between lover and beloved, between the soul and its source, grew thin and finally dissolved. The longing we feel for what we have lost, Rumi discovered, is the same longing the soul feels for the one it came from. Grief fully entered becomes a door. In the next chapter, we will follow Rumi into the long years after Shams, the years of maturity, when the wandering fire settled into a steady flame, and the grieving lover became a master who could light the same fire in countless others.